I'm so happy to be here today. I get to wear my sesquicentennial socks. I've been sufficiently empurpled in the year that I've been here at TCU. So it's an honor and a privilege for me to kind of serve as a moderator for this panel. And it's interesting for me as well that it is mission critical energy security. Ironically enough, I read too much sometimes. And this last month, I kind of ran across an article in Foreign Affairs that did a deep dive into energy security, and it kind of jolted me a little bit. I'm an old nuclear policy analyst that's been looking at energy policies since the early 1990s, and I had a fixed notion in my mind of what energy security was really all about. And I think that for the first time, I was being challenged in a way that I had forgotten I could be. Reminded me of being back in graduate school and having my professor kind of poke me in the chest and asking me to fully justify how I was framing something and to be able to articulate it in a fashion that made sense not only to me but to the people that I was talking with. And so as I read that article, one of the things that I thought was very important there was how I could then situate where we're at today as we relate our issues in the field of energy and energy security. And it said that there were four themes that were emerging that were going to force us to kind of perhaps redefine what energy security is. And so I'm blessed to have with us today some remarkable panelists that are going to kind of help us navigate through that. I think that part of what this conference is intending to do is to invigorate your thinking in a way that enables you to meet the challenges that we're all facing across the entire spectrum of energy as we know it. And so I'm very grateful to have with us up today three remarkable individuals, Barry Davis, Patrick Alexander, Aaron Wheeler. They will provide for us kind of their insights into how they're defining at this particular moment energy security. And I hope, in the spirit of what we've already seen this morning, that this will generate some questions on your behalf, because I'm sure that you all have perspectives as well. One of the things that I'd like them to think about as they're talking about these is how can we think about energy in a manner that allows us to have a better understanding of what it means for us to be resilient in this arena. In addition to how we can be more accountable as it relates to energy security, and perhaps how we may have more transparency in the things that we're doing, so those outside of our little, enclaves understand both the meaning and the significance and impact of the things that we talk about on a daily basis here. So what I've asked my panelists to do is to spend about 5 to 7 minutes just kind of ruminating a little bit, reflecting upon how they see it from their perspective. They will tell you exactly what they do and how that might animate and inform our thinking. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Barry first to go ahead and start. Barry, thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's good to be here. As Kyle said earlier, it's great to be back on campus. A couple of things that hit me this morning as I'm here. First of all, what a great leadership that we have here at the university. Having been in Glendale recently, and I don't remember what happened the week after that. You guys laughing. See, Glendale was good, Los Angeles not so good. But having been there and being here and seeing us leading in some areas in the energy is a really fun thing to do. I was reminded yesterday, or just this morning, of how much I love TCU and how purple I bleed. So I'm in the process of moving my office and furnishing a new office, and I go through a discussion yesterday with the people that are doing that, and my wife suggests that my office should be green because it's going to be golf art. So I get home and I go along with it, and it seems right. But I wake up this morning and I said, no, let's change it all to purple. Green, and I'm not against 90 miles south of here at all. And my daughter went to school there, and I love Baylor. But green isn't what I bleed. I bleed purple. So it's great to be here. As I think about energy security, I think of one of my longtime friends who's been in this industry longer than I have, around this industry longer than I have. And something that he said years ago, he said, 2 things I've learned about the oil industry. Number one is that they've never seen a well that they couldn't figure out how to drill, and number two, they've never seen a hole that they couldn't fill. And what he meant by that is just the innovation and the things that we've done in order to meet the demands of this country and the world as it relates to providing the energy that we need. You know, you don't have to look back very far to remember when we talked about peak oil. And in fact, there was a talk that I used to give about 20 years ago, and I said for decades, the natural gas industry has produced domestically about 50 to 55 BCF a day. And I said, that's kind of what we will always produce. It's what we've always produced. And here we are today producing 100 BCF a day in this country. Oil similarly has had a similar type growth over the last couple of decades. So this industry has been resilient. As Kyle mentioned earlier, we are an adaptive country. We are an innovative country, and I think that's what you've seen us do in this industry and what you'll continue to see us do. I loved the conversation in the first panel about carbon capture and sequestration. That would be the example that I would give of one of the most adaptive things that we've done in a hurry as it relates to the energy transition and moving towards a cleaner industry. So 10 years ago, we'd do an investor discussion with somebody in the European markets, and all we would hear was about energy transition, as if overnight we were going to see the hydrocarbon energy business go away. And which obviously would have been very bad for the company that I was with, EnLink Midstream. And I quickly adapted a response to that I think has proven to be true. Energy transition is a real thing, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen over decades, and we're going to see hydrocarbon energy continue to play an important role for decades to come, and we're seeing that now. Quite frankly, I'm thankful that our friends in Europe kind of took the lead and saw the downside of trying to transition too quickly. And so we can now learn from that and do things differently. I've heard recently somebody use this, and I love the phrase. They said, we've moved from an energy transition revolution to an energy transition evolution. And I think that's what we're seeing now as we see things being done differently. Just to speak to carbon capture, at EnLink, you know, it's kind of funny because I saw it I saw it go from zero, from nothing to what it is today, and everything that was talked about in the first panel. EnLink Midstream is right in the middle of that, and maybe on the front leading edge of that. So we put a group probably 4 years ago into what I call kind of a cave, and we said, guys, go figure it out. We're living in one of the largest, the highest emissions areas in the country, right in the Gulf Coast of Louisiana. Go figure out if there's something that we're supposed to be doing. It was a handful of creative, innovative, young engineers, and what they came up with is that we could repurpose natural gas pipelines throughout the state of Louisiana. We were fortunate to have multiple pipes, often in the same areas, and we could repurpose a portion of those lines into CO2 service, and that's happening in a big way today. I think EnLink Midstream will be moving 20 million tons a year within the next 5 to 10 years. That's a lot of CO2 that will be coming out of the air that is related to the production and consumption of hydrocarbon energy. So just an example. So I do think what we saw happen a decade ago in Europe, where there was an energy revolution that was going to happen, kind of put on the radar in the big enough way, it got our attention, and we're doing things differently so that hydrocarbons can continue to play a role for a long time. Two things I think it did that are negative that I'm seeing lived out right now in the world that I'm in. Number one is the capital markets are not conducive to continue to drill oil and gas wells. We have not seen the response that we should see, and I think part of that is there is not a long-term commitment to by the capital markets to support oil and gas development in this country. I'm involved in the creation of a new upstream company right now, and yesterday we had a meeting about who we're going to do our banking with, and we're questioning whether there is a single bank in the market today that wants to start a new relationship with an upstream oil and gas company. And that was a real conversation. The second big thing I think it has done is I think that the people shortage is a real thing. I've been in board meetings this week with a company that I'm involved with. And I would tell you the number one takeaway was there are not enough people to operate in this industry to respond to the growth that is possible and the people that we need. The cost creep is incredible, and at no price can you actually add the people that you need to operate all the facilities that we need. So those are two downsides, I think, that the negative ideology around hydrocarbon energy has created. Thank you, John.
So I'm going to go ahead and turn the microphone over to Aaron, but I also want you kind of to incorporate into your comments elements of both diversification and integration as you see it. So, Aaron Wheeler.
Yeah, thanks very much. It has been really interesting to hear about the discussions thus far, that we had about the national security, the Oceania initiative that's being taken by the school here, and about how that comes back to home, because if we don't have strong and diverse energy sources here at home, we're not going to be able, certainly not going to be able to have the wherewithal to project power around the globe and to support our strategic partners. The thing that I think is really important to remember is that when we talk about the diversification of and electrification that is being promoted across the energy industry, one of the greatest risks, I think, is we're dealing with a power grid that was designed to operate on a base load, to prioritize base load, and then to go from there into some type of peaking scenario. So as we look at the concept of transition, even if it is an evolution, we're looking at situations where we're adding tremendous amounts of volatility in the form of the renewables. When the intermittency is something that is extremely incompatible with the way that the grid is currently designed. One of the things also that's interesting when you look at it from a financial market standpoint. The financial markets are prepared. We've heard, in the market, we've heard quite a lot of discussion about, well, we're going to need new financial products. We're going to need new ways of dealing with this, with intermittency and things like that. And that's absolutely not true. The financial markets are ready to deal with intermittency, and there are plenty of. What we're seeing is option products that used to be just hedges. We used to take these as hedges, and you put a heat rate call option or power put or whatever it is, and those used to be things that you were using just to protect yourself. And what we're seeing now is we're seeing that those things are now becoming an investment basis. They're being used as a source of funding for new infrastructure, new peaking infrastructure. So the response to intermittency is always going to be fossil responsiveness, and so we're seeing some very, very interesting things with regards to financial markets and their response to the diversification. With regards to battery storage, I think that we're seeing a lot of interest in that. When we look at taking an 84-month look out into the future and trying to understand, what our ability will be to deploy capital in an environment that is constrained on the mining side. We don't really see that as being, at least currently, unless there's a real sea change in permitting for these new mines. But we've actually seen permitting drop for mines. We don't see batteries as being a credible source of stability for the grid, just because you can't get the minerals out fast enough to build the batteries. There's some tremendous efforts that are being made to recycle existing batteries. However, we don't believe that that's going to be something that's going to move the needle, at least in the near term.
So is Kyle still here? You stole my thunder, my friend. So we were going to talk a little bit about small modular nuclear reactors, and I got somebody here to talk about it. So Patrick, I want to turn it over to you, and kind of if you could offer some of your insights. And audience, if you have any questions that you'd like to direct toward the panelists, start putting them together now. We'll have the graduate students gather them up, and I want us to have a conversation in the remaining time that we have, but I'll turn it over to Patrick now.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here. This is only my second conference, so my speaking skills may not be the best, but I'm going to give you energy security from an engineering perspective, because that's where I come from. That's my background. I've been in nuclear power for over 15 years. And whenever we were designing the Natrium plant, one of the things we saw that current LWRs in the US do not do is dispatchable power. So we knew that if we were going to build a future generation, a fourth generation plant, we knew it needed some key things to ensure the grid stability and pair with renewables. So we designed a plant that could provide dispatchable power using molten salt energy storage. And this gives us the same kind of capabilities that you can see at fossil plants and allows us to pair well with renewables. So this molten salt energy storage is not a new concept. You've seen it in several solar plants, and we plan on using it to be very effective in not only providing electric power, but potentially non-electric applications of nuclear heat. So we can take this molten salt, and instead of powering a turbine generator, we can provide district heating, we can provide heat to chemical plants, which allows us to integrate in more energy markets than just electricity. As far as resilience goes, we've been talking about resilience a lot, and one of the big things that we rely on for the fourth gen reactors is HALEU, which currently the biggest source of HALEU right now is from Russia. So we can all understand how the geopolitical tensions there have kind of limited our supply. So TerraPower is committed to working with the DOE and GNF to bring HALEU production back to the US to help improve the resiliency of the fuel market in the US. Along with that, when thinking about design, a lot of the current LWRs have a lot of custom design products, custom valves, custom components, and we saw that as a weakness because getting custom components can be very hard 20 years down the line. So we're focusing on commercial off-the-shelf components. Not only does this reduce cost, reduce the difficulties of replacing obsolescent components, but it also makes it have a more diverse supply chain. You don't have to focus on just one company that can only provide that one custom component. So it kind of improves the resiliency of these plants to stay economical over the life of 20, 40, 60 years. We've also got a big problem with workforce development, and this is where I can see institutions like TCU really helping out. Nuclear power is currently the new thing. A lot of people are starting to start nuclear companies, realizing that nuclear is the only way we can really get off of carbon completely or mostly. But the workforce isn't really there. Every company is fighting for nuclear engineers, nuclear workers, and this lack of expertise and skill set is a real weakness in the US market, whereas it's getting built out a lot in China and Russia because they're expanding quickly. I think they have currently 66 nuclear reactors in the works in both Russia and China and various nations across the world. So in order to ensure we maintain the edge over Russia and China, we need to build out our workforce to make sure we have these technologies developed and provide the expertise needed to bring a product to not only the US, but to the rest of the world as well. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Great. So I know we have some questions, but I did want to throw something out there. So recently I kind of came across some really interesting information as it relates to energy security. And it has a lot to do with the evolution toward electric vehicles in this country. You know, the necessity of having a supply of batteries. If you think that 60% of the lithium available will be found in Australia, and significant portions of cobalt will be found in the Republic of the Congo. Today, presently, 60 to 90% of the processing of those resources is being done in China. So yet again, we find ourselves exposed in a manner that we didn't ever intentionally think that we would. And so it raises the specter of there being, even at a moment when we seem to be crossing over the divide into a world where there are more electric vehicles, that we may not have the requisite supply of batteries or the resources for batteries, battery storage and what have you, in order to be able to really capture that market in a manner that we anticipate that we'd like to. I think that that also raises the specter for us as we think about how we want to proceed into the future. So I know I got a couple of questions. If I could have them brought on up, I'd like us to go ahead and begin to address. And as you have more questions, folks, please feel free to raise your hand. So this question is for Barry. Why are the capital markets not willing to invest in hydrocarbon energy? Can you expound for us, please?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Again, I would say it started several years ago as the ideology of a energy transition was going to happen overnight, and that hydrocarbon energy was not the future, and we started seeing it become what we called uninvestable was the word that we heard. This is an uninvestable energy, and there would even be a comparison to some other industries that I won't name because I don't like the association, but some that truly became uninvestable industries because they were harmful to your health, for example. And so I think that that really created just this anti-hydrocarbon bias in the space. Now we're seeing that change. We're seeing some real influential organizations that are starting to change the narrative on that and are coming back to thinking about, energy security, not just energy transition, but energy security and also economics. And so I think it's better, but it's not where we would need it to be in order to respond the way that we would hope to be able to respond in a energy independent country. And having, the market embrace the development of that energy in this country.
Yeah, so I'll add a little something as well there. When you look at the way that financial institutions make decisions about creditworthiness, particularly, there are a couple of different risk profiles. One of the risk profiles that they're going to look at is they look at the chance that someone else, another institution, is going to loan money to a particular company. And when the regulatory risk started to grow for hydrocarbon industry, that's when things really started to kind of go wrong. I think it was 2018, 2019, things started to head in the wrong direction with regards to the relationship between hydrocarbon producers and transportation and the financial markets. That's turning around a little bit, I think, but there's still a lot of very household name banks that that will not open lines of credit and things like that. For my company, we have quite a number of fossil fuel assets, and we went to try to open a credit card line, a commercial card line with a major bank, and we were declined for that, for no financial reason other than that we have these assets in our portfolio, and they know that, and they declined to open that commercial line. Had no other financial basis to it. So that's the real challenge. It's extremely disappointing. We're truly supporting the industrial and commercial growth of this country, and it's one of those things where the banks, many banks, are still very, very reluctant to open lines of credit.
I can top that off with a nuclear perspective. So as you know, there's a lot of fourth-gen companies out there trying to get into the market, but just like hydrocarbons, them saying it's risky. So just to give you perspective, to build a nuclear power plant, you need 3 years of permitting, at least, in order just to start construction. The risk of just 3 years of waiting for a maybe yes or no, that's a large investment that a lot of companies can't get over, especially for first-of-a-kind plants. So it's hard for new entrants into the market to get the kind of financial backing needed to get these, because these large utilities, they're very risk-averse because they have to explain to, in the regulated markets, their customers, their rate base. They have to explain why they need to put this and why it's a good value proposition. And on a lot of first-of-a-kind reactors, it's hard to make that explanation.
You know, and it really raises the point that you know, as we speak of diversification, it has to be a much more inclusive type of term. And that I think we're given some evidence here that folks aren't fully embracing the totality of what that means. And I think there's some marketing work that has to be done by the industry to kind of educate the public about this, you know, because, you know, I come from a generation now where nuclear is off limits. And yet we know factually that this may be part of the solution to diversifying our portfolio in a manner that allows us to continue to have both sustainable and affordable energy. One of the questions
Jonathan,
from the audience is that we... Go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment of just how recent that is. It was only 18 months ago we were planning last year's version of the Energy Symposium here, and the topic was energy transition. And early in those conversations, I brought up that, you know, hydrocarbon energy should be part of the conversation. And I believe Ann was, you know, it was kind of a light went on. It was like, okay, we're talking energy transition. It should be all about renewables. It should be all about everything except fossil fuels. And so, I mean, I think that's how rapidly things are changing around what needs to happen in an energy transitioning world. And in fact, we do have a position for some time, and it will be an evolution. So I think it's happening right in front of us.
Okay. So I have a question from the audience. Is that we have high levels of nuclear waste disposal at WIPP. We have the ability for it to travel around the country safely, but the aversion to nuclear is emotional. Why don't we mandate storage intermediate in places like Nevada in the ground, you know, where it's off limits due to nuclear testing? Question. So that would be for our nuclear engineer there.
So I think we've all heard the many politicians state, not in my backyard, right? So they're fine with nuclear, but not in my backyard. And this is more of a perception, because nuclear is one of the most safe form of power. It gets some bad press due to some major events in the past that occurred, but in the U.S., the safety levels are better than solar, better than wind. We have less death per megawatt hour than almost any other form of energy. And I think really it's education of the people in the world, in the U.S., on the safety of nuclear power and how all the regulations that are currently in place will protect them from any type of release of any sort. And we just need to get the politicians on board with a good waste disposal location. And I'm not sure how long that will take, but they're fully funded, so.
Great. So this is a question for the entire panel. 50% of the barrel of oil goes to making products we use every day. How does this underinvestment in traditional energy affect the supply chain for products going forward?
Yeah, so it has a tremendous effect, but as with most of these spurious activities, what ends up happening is it occurs over a very long period of time. So, you know, when we look at, we can look at a baseline of inflation that's going to rise that underpins other kind of cyclic events that occur in the economy. So, you know, so are we going to immediately see, you know, a tremendous increase, you know, a 50% increase in the price of plastic beads, you know, to create plastic products? Probably not. At least not over a 12-month period. But that will rise as you choke off investment, as we're talking about, into traditional forms of energy that allow us to explore and extract extract hydrocarbon resources. That chokes off the ability to have abundance of those resources to create the products that we all need. So when you look at global plastics production is a small percentage of the total hydrocarbon extracted and then delivered to various value chains. So really the plastics markets are very much the beneficiaries of widespread use of hydrocarbons as transport fuel. primarily. So it's really important to realize that the plastics are highly, and don't believe anybody that says that we can replace plastics in medical field and stuff like that with glass and leather and things like that we used years ago. It's not going to work.
Yeah, the only comment I would have is supply and demand works, and the the price response to that. And so far, we've been able to do what we need to do. Again, a part of the the innovation and the adaptiveness of our industry and our country. I think where we'd get in trouble is if we were to do something that would overweight regulation to the point where supply and demand doesn't work, and we're not able to see a price response that allows us to to develop whatever source of energy we need to meet the demand. And I think we're at risk of that. I think we've seen some cases where there was a tendency to overregulate to the point where supply and demand may not have worked.
And we all know the law of unintended consequences. So whenever you're shifting away from hydrocarbons, all of a sudden you have a less demand, so supply starts shrinking down towards that demand. And this could cause mines or extractors to start ceasing, which would cause any other use for those hydrocarbons outside of the energy industry, like plastics, to start raising those prices.
So here's a question. Why aren't we focusing on thorium? China and India, let me see, and it helps to address the Russia problem.
So thorium is not as mature a technology. So it's similar in fusion in the fact that it's still got some years to go before it's a viable option. There's lots of hurdles in the way. Scalability is one. But I believe it is a good direction to be going in because thorium is very resource abundant, whereas the current supply of uranium, I think, is not as abundant. So thorium is the direction we should be going in, but until thorium is fully matured product, uranium is going to be what we use primarily.
So for each of you, what would be the primary challenge that you're facing in the immediate future to the security and the environment in which you're operating? And think about it both from the immediacy of how you do day-to-day operations, but a kind of a more of a macro-industrial type of perspective as well, because I think that that's really kind of what we're hoping to focus on here in terms of mission critical.
So I think that a lot of time has been spent talking today about regulatory uncertainty. I think regulatory uncertainty remains a major concern, and this is not just for. It's ironic that this is not just for the fossil fuel industry, but also for every group that is trying to put power on the grid, trying to bring the power to the people, as they say. So the more that can be done to take the uncertainty out of the regulatory process, and sometimes that means bringing the decision-making power back to the states, like we were talking about earlier. Taking power away from federal agencies and giving it to state agencies. Sometimes that's the answer. Other times it's just the removal of the regulatory hurdles that are in place, especially from the standpoint of just delays, right? There sometimes you're involved in processes that, for whatever reason it takes 18 months, 24 months, 36 months to get something done that seems like it should only take 4 months. One of the other things too, and we've seen this happening here in ERCOT, is there are processes being put into place to prioritize things like dispatchable generation to support kind of the renewable plants, the wind and the solar. So they are working on doing things like that. That's a great way or I think that's a great example for other regulatory bodies, to follow, in kind of removing some of these regulatory hurdles, so we can actually get something done and have a functional power grid.
Yeah, I would focus on the people shortage that I think is the biggest challenge that we're all facing. And I think the answer to that, I mean, we're not going to, come up with more people in the next few decades. I think it's a problem that's only going to get worse. There's plenty of research that says that, not only in this industry, but in all industries. We've got to figure out how to deal with the lack of people resources. And so I think that comes through automation, through the advancement of AI. Just to give you an example, at EnLink in the last couple of years that I was there, we had gone from operating, I think we had 24 operating natural gas processing plants, and we would operate those plants with people on site, probably on average 6 to 10, maybe 12 people on location in each of those facilities. We had automated those facilities, and it's still happening right now, but basically bringing all of that operation into a central operating facility in Dallas, where we're basically turning valves, doing all that we need to do to operate gas plants from a location in Dallas with our best and brightest operations people. And so we just got to see more of that, because I think it's going to continue to be a problem. Everything from turning valves in the field to operating boats in the rivers to drilling rigs, et cetera. We've got to find ways to automate and reduce the number of people required in our operations.
Thank you, both of y'all, for stealing both of mine. Regulations and skilled workforce, that's what's going to be mine too as well. Currently, nuclear regulation is probably the most complicated regulation to get through in the U.S. in regards of building any type of infrastructure. Just to give you an idea, for the first application for a construction permit, it takes about 29 months to get that passed through. And then you still have to go through an operating license application, which is another 18 to 24 months. So just for the government to review your application is almost 5 years, which is quite a long time to wait for the government to get through the process of permitting your regulated utility. So that is one of the big things that I think is a hurdle that the nuclear industry has been trying to overcome for the past 20 years, and it's been a difficult process. But the other is the skilled workforce. Nuclear is not the only one that's lacking on skilled workforce right now. To build a nuclear power plant, you need 1,000 to 2,000 skilled laborers to go and help build those. And if we're entering a new renaissance where we're going to be potentially building 3, 4, 5 nuclear power plants all at once across the nation, I'm not sure if we have enough skilled laborers to support that kind of infrastructure. So we're going to have to come up with new ways to get, high schoolers, community colleges, TCU could be part of this as well, but figure out ways of getting these skilled laborers, these skilled engineers out there to help design, build, and construct these plants.
Really interestingly, this question is that two of you have mentioned, actually all of us have, the human capital bottlenecks. And so they want us to expand a little bit on the shortage. Is it early, mid, late career professionals? Is it all of the above? What type? Is it engineers, geoscientists, finance, et cetera? What are the specific gaps? And are there any proposed solutions? Actually, what I've been hearing is that we probably need an energy security Manhattan project that focuses on human capital development in a manner that we haven't thought about previously. We've done this before in this country. There is a precedent to this. And I would, and this is the kind of thing that I would think we should be aggressively lobbying our elected officials to begin thinking about how we situate our colleges, our universities, our community colleges, our technical institutions in this country to begin to address that. This isn't the only industry that's facing that today. I think that we've chased people off for all the wrong reasons for some of the things that have built the country and made it what it is today. And I think that it's really kind of unfortunate that we have to be having this type of a conversation, because I think it strikes right to the core of who we are as a nation. I think the charge is that we provide our society with stability, prosperity, and security. And to that end, I don't think that we've done a very, very intelligent job of addressing that. Do any of you want to add anything to that? I see Ann over there by the microphone, so I think we're going to have, no, okay, here we go, one more.
So one thing that can be done, which is really fascinating, and we've actually started doing some of this, is when you're working on responding to procedurals, basically composing regulatory documents, things of that nature, obviously it all has to be proofread, but you can actually use AI systems to do that. AI is perfect for responding to regulatory matters and composing, responsive to government requirements. So if you can take people away from doing some of those, very time-consuming, it's almost troubling the amount of hours that have been spent on responding to regulatory procedurals. It's something, and then train them to do other things that AI can't do. Then that's a possibility. I think AI has great potential in that area.
Jonathan, I think what you said is significant. I think we have to have a national energy plan that we can all go back to. It's kind of that true north of how do we sell this industry? How do the capital markets, have any confidence? And I think we need to see leadership at that level so that we have something that we can actually market from. Is the future of the energy industry. And until we have that, I think we're all grasping for things. We're trying to solve for how do we get 20-year-olds to come in to replace the 60-year-olds in our industry, and we're all doing that individually. But there needs to be a more wholesome approach to doing that.
Well, listen, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for your time this morning. Patrick, Aaron, Barry, thank you so much. I see Ann lurking by the microphones over there, so I think I'm getting the hook. Anyway, thank you so much.